Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Independent Thought. My name is Desmond Price. For today's episode, I am bringing you yet another candidate episode. This is the fourth one that we're doing this season for season 4. And for this candidate episode of October, we are joined by Daniel Wilson, a candidate who is running to represent Ventura County this year out of California. Currently, that is the 26th district of California, but California is one of the states that's currently redistricting. So we're not sure exactly where the final district will lay, but nevertheless, Daniel, thank you for joining Independent Thought today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, I want to go ahead and just dive right in. Typically, whenever we have one of these episodes, the first things first, we want to get a little bit of a couple personal questions to kind of get to know you a little bit before we dive into the issues. So, the first thing I want to know, which is a question that I ask a lot of people involved in politics, is what exactly drew you into the political sphere in general? Have you always kind of been politically active, or did you become more interested a little bit like later in life, like, high school, college, so on and so forth?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that question. So I'm actually one of the millions. For a long time, I was the silent majority. I was a completely inactive voter for the majority of my life. The first time I ever voted, the second time I ever voted was in 2016. I voted once in 2002 when I was the first time that I was eligible to vote. But beyond that, for the next almost 20 years, I never cast a ballot again. I never paid any attention to what was going on around me. As far as political, we believe that we don't matter, and that no matter what happens, no matter what we put our vote out to, that it's not going to change the system. And we've come a long way from that, and our registration numbers, nationally and here locally, are climbing. But I've actually seen a discouraging trend of, again, people are getting frustrated with electoral politics and wanting to withdraw. And I am here to be so eager and so enthusiastic to encourage everybody to continue voting, because it is the most important thing that we can do. So I've done a complete 180 to believing that my vote didn't matter, to understanding that it is one of the most important things that we can do as residents of a country.
Absolutely. And yes, it very much is so. I definitely believe in that. I'm hosting a political podcast, so obviously getting people engaged in politics, something that I firmly believe in. Now, you told me when we spoke previously that one of the figures that kind of led to you, I guess, re-emerging into politics, getting reactivated, was Bernie Sanders. You told me that he kind of inspired you a little bit watching his campaign for president. What exactly was it about his campaign that inspired you, and how is that translated into what you do now?
Absolutely. Thank you again. So with Bernie Sanders, it was the first time we ever saw a political candidate stand up for the people. And a lot of candidates have said that throughout our American history and our political history. But it was the first one who said solemnly, I'm here for you, and I stand for you, and I fight with you. And then instead of just talking the talk, he actually turned around and walked the walk. And he said to the billionaires who buy our elections, he said to the corporations and the lobbyists who rig our elections and make sure that certain candidates get in over others, he told them, no more. I'm paid for by the grassroots, by the people, and not the billionaires, as he would say. So yeah, absolutely. It was just really inspiring to watch somebody actually fight for the people, and you can hear it, you can see it in everything that he did. And while we don't have to agree with all of his decisions ever since then, nobody can deny that he has ignited a generation to care about politics that was really quickly becoming a politically lost generation. We had nothing to fight for, no reason to be involved. As a millennial, I'm sure you can relate to a lot of the things that have shaped my political life, and both the withdrawal and the inclusion of now being involved in the politics. So yeah, absolutely, Bernie Sanders. He inspired me so much that I canvassed for him quite a few times. And then I also started volunteering at the polls in 2016, and did that for the next 4 years, actually, in the 2018. And then I actually got a job with the county elections office. Once that fire was ignited, it's just been almost impossible to put out. I've just been insatiable to get involved and learn more and know more, and then also spread that education.
Absolutely. And figuring out exactly what shapes people's political beliefs has always been very interesting to me, as a reason why I asked that question so much. And so kind of like diving a little bit further into that now, you also said that you spent some time in the Navy. Now, how exactly did that service impact your politics now? And is there like a particular story that I guess would have led to how it did impact your politics?
Sure. So I would say that at the time, I would have told you that it didn't affect me at all. That as far as politically, that because I was a non-voter when I went in, and when I got out, I was still a non-voter. So I served from 2009 until 2013. So it was still 3 years later before I was politically engaged and involved. So if you had asked me when I left the Navy, I would have said it didn't change my political beliefs at all. I still believe what I believed then. I just have a little bit more understanding of what the military is and involves. I have always been anti-war. So that, while it was doubled down and I am more firmly rooted in it, and I can explain why I'm anti-war more than I could have, say, when I was 18, 19 years old. When I first graduated from high school, so this is another thing that really, I guess, has shaped me even before the military, was I was a senior in high school when the Twin Towers fell. I watched it in homeroom as the towers fell in New York. And then I grew up less than 30 minutes from the Pentagon, where we watched the third plane hit. And many of us, not only did we want to go enlist, but there were also even more military recruiters at the schools than I had ever seen. And they were absolutely relentless with us kids, whether we wanted to be involved or not. They talked to all of us. And a lot of us wanted to, like I said, so we followed that path anyway. I started to look into it. I even took like the pre-tests, and the ASVAB is what it's called, and started looking into some things. But at the time, full disclosure for your audience, I'm a trans male, something else that has shaped my political beliefs a lot. But at the time I was living as an open female, as an open lesbian. And that was still under Don't Ask, Don't Tell in 2001. And so I already didn't agree with the war, where we were going, why we were going. And then I was a lesbian. So I didn't end up enlisting at the time. Fast forward a number of years later, I ended up enlisting anyway. So I was always anti-war. I didn't believe that we should have been over there. And watching everything that's happening now, 20 years later, that's probably something you might want to discuss specifically at some point, but the withdrawal from Afghanistan and everything that's happening there. There's a lot of mixed emotions with the veterans who, people that didn't come home. And there's a lot of questions, and that's a whole other thing we can get into. So I would say when I got out of the Navy, it didn't affect me. But once I got politically engaged and involved in 2016, and I applied the knowledge and the experience of being in the Navy to my politics, that has shaped me to be anti-war, anti-imperialist. I believe we need to close our overseas military bases. It's absurd that we are the only nation in the world that has bases in other places. It's just absolutely unacceptable. We have over 800 bases in 80 different countries. If anybody wanted to do that here, we would consider it an act of war. And yet we expect other nations to willfully let us there. We still have colonies. That was something that really shook me in my education at learning that we call them territories and protectorates, but we still have colonies. So I'm anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, anti-war, and all of that definitely comes out in my politics for sure.
Right. And I do appreciate you talking about that, because, we are recording this episode, about a month before it's going to be released. But, currently what we're seeing is a heavy dose of like pro-war interventionist rhetoric coming through the media right now. And it's happening on both sides. It's happening in, left-leaning media and in right-leaning media. And that kind of like leads me into my next question. You've decided to run in this race as a non-partisan. Now, can you explain to me why you're choosing to do that right now? Because it feels as though in our current political landscape, you almost have to pick a side, unfortunately, but you've chosen not to. Why is that?
So that is really interesting that you phrase it that way. I've been talking to people for a long time about this, but just in the last, I would say 2 to 3 weeks, I've gotten that specific question. Or been told you need to pick a side. And so it's just really interesting that you worded it that way, because that has been a common theme. I've been told in our hyper-partisan system, you have to pick a side, or you're going to be seen as weak or wishy-washy or ambivalent on certain things. And I challenge all of those notions. I 100% believe that I have chosen a side and I've chosen the people. There will never be a party, a corporation, a lobbyist, or some fossil fuel executive standing between me and my constituents, period. And so that is the side that I have chosen, is the side of the people. And the reason is actually our hyperpartisanship in this country. Both through my experience working at the polls, volunteering on the outside, and then working for the county office, working on the inside, and then my experience running for office. Anytime politics starts to get brought up, especially since politics was already hyperpartisan in our country, and 2016 just set everything on fire. And it's been so incredibly divisive. I saw a clip this morning or yesterday. Somebody pulled his truck off onto the side of the road to go scream at a news anchor that was reporting just on the hurricane.
Right.
We are so politically charged that this gentleman who was just saying, oh, there's wind and rain and the things are flooded, and this gentleman pulled over his truck and reported accurately. It's wind and rain. I'm reporting it accurately. I'm standing in it, sir. But so even to the weather, we can't discuss the weather without it being political and hyperpartisan. And so I think that a couple things lead to that. One, for so long, you've heard the motto or the mantra, 2 things you don't talk about in a bar is religion and politics. Or these are the things you don't talk about at a family thing is religion and politics. And I think that's actually done us a great disservice, is that we don't talk about politics. Everybody's so afraid. And that's before it was set on fire. That, and sure, there was still hyperpartisanship, but it always seemed, it was like there was fringes always fighting, and then there was a lot of moderates in the middle, where I feel like now it's more fringes on both sides, extreme fighting, and then a slim amount of moderates that have no idea what's going on around them as far as like, where do I go? What do I do? Everybody's crazy. And so with that, what I've found is that having conversations with people, whether it's about a specific political person, policy, legislation, our environment, the weather, any and all of it, you get responses, oh, well, you're just a stupid Democrat, or, oh, you're a dumb Republican. And I say, well, no, I'm neither, actually. And Desmond, you can see them physically relax.
Right.
And then they go, tell me about that. I didn't know you could do that. What do you mean you're not either? And you're running for office, especially now that I'm running for office, it's even more confusing to them, because even when you don't choose red or blue, even when you don't choose Democrat or Republican, you have to go green or independent or libertarian. There's still a party that you are told you have to jump into. Right. And I am here to tell everybody that you don't. And now I am extremely spoiled here in California, and I can explain why I have a better shot at doing this than a lot of other states. I have a path to the nomination, I have a path to the ballot without a Democratic or Republican, without a party nomination at all. So I'm especially spoiled here, and it's what I think we need to expand to our entire country. I've chosen to run nonpartisan, and other people are doing so. Since Nina, it was already a huge withdrawal after the 2020 election. We had record numbers leaving both the Republican and the Democratic Party, either switching their registry and not just saying, oh, I'm not voting for them again, going through the steps to change their registration to other or nonpartisan, no party preference, depending on your state's language. And so then it's just continued to go that way. The withdrawal from overseas, the, continued economic instability. We can't blame it on any one party anymore. Both parties have been involved in all of these things that are failing us right now. And so I'm telling everybody, choose different, this is the nonpartisan revolution that has begun. Since Nina Turner's loss in Ohio, there have been 3 candidates that have withdrawn from the Democratic Party. Congressional candidate in San Francisco. I'll leave their names out of my mouth and let them tell their own story, but a congressional candidate in San Francisco, state assembly candidate in Maryland, and now she's running again. I will say this one. She announced it on Instagram. Paula Jean Swearingen has also just left the Democratic Party. And so not only are people fed up with, politics and the partisanship, but saying, we're forging a different path here. And just because a lot of the pushback I'm hearing is you have to choose a side, you have to pick a party, or there's no path. And I'm here to tell everybody, just because you can't see the path doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I'm from Maryland. I'm used to shoveling snow. Let's clear this path. Let's make a new one. The game has been rigged for so long. I feel like we have to write new rules and just take a different path.
Okay. Got the shovel and snow analogy in there. I like it. You know, as also a northerner here, you know, sometimes you got to break out the shovels a little bit, but you know,
Absolutely.
there are many different, you know, things I would like to touch on just right there. But I think the thing that you're touching on the most is staying true to the people itself. And if that is the case, then it doesn't really matter if you have a party or not that you're attached to. But, you know, kind of what you were talking about in that video that you saw, where you saw that the man run out of the truck. I also saw that video. So, you know, shout out to the Rational National. Saw that video recently.
David Dahl.
Yeah. And, you know, Hurricane Ida, you know, hit Louisiana, you know, end of August.
Travesty.
Yeah. And what we were hearing is that that storm, just like so many other storms, was a product of, you know, increased warm water due to climate change, which is why it was like tied for the second strongest hurricane to ever hit Louisiana.
Right.
So with that being said, I want to start focusing now on issues specifically.
Sure.
So in regards to climate change, I live here in the Northwest. We spent a good portion of our summer under smoke, how we have been for, you know, the last several years now. I mean, it feels like almost every single year we can't enjoy our summers anymore because we're breathing in smoke for the entire summer, if not mostly the entire summer. So there is several options out there for how you can address climate change. Obviously, people, you know, notably always talk about the Green New Deal, but I want to ask you specifically, if elected, you're sitting in the halls of Congress, what kind of legislation would you propose in order to address climate change?
Absolutely. So I think that it's number one, a travesty what's happening in Louisiana. Not only could it have been prevented both off of climate mitigation policies and processes, but also this is exactly what happened to Katrina. It's exactly what happened. And it is almost to the day that it had happened again on the anniversary of it. And it's still, the levees failed. There wasn't enough. So not only is it climate and environmental devastation, but government rot and neglect for not taking care of the infrastructure that would have saved these people's lives and their property and their livelihoods, businesses that may never come back, houses. Just, I mean, the Twitter was on fire the other night, just people tweeting out what houses people were sitting on top of. They were trapped in their attic, just begging for resources, millions of people without power. And it's a failure at every level. And that is what we are seeing, whether you're on the West Coast, in the Northwest, in the South, the Southeast, the Northeast. There is infrastructure failures and government failures that are being exacerbated when our man-made climate devastation rolls back to bite us, because we've both failed our infrastructure, our people, and our climate. And so it's so multifaceted that there's no one fix for it, because we need to change who's in office. We need to change who's making certain decisions. As far as I was having a conversation with a constituent yesterday about the impact that a public works department has on a local community, because they decide where money goes and what parks they renovate, or if they put it into a contractor's pocket and it never sees a park. So all the way down from our local, very local appointed and elected offices, all the way up to the president, we've been failed. And so immediately, it's so sad that the Green New Deal legislation hasn't been passed, because it's not even a legislation. If you read the bill, all it calls for is government acknowledgement that something needs to happen. It's not even legislation to be enacted. It's just the government saying, yes, we should probably do something. And we can't even get a vote on that, nor it passed. That needs to happen first and foremost, because nobody is going to do anything with any other environmental legislation that gets put up if we cannot even vote and agree that something needs to be done. So that is first and foremost what needs to happen. If it needs to be reproposed as a different name, yes, slogans are good and it helps people understand what your message is because they've heard it before, it becomes familiar. But there is also a point where a slogan becomes detractive and destructive from the point and from the mission. And so if the only reason the Republicans, conservatives, moderates won't sign on to that piece of legislation is because it says the words Green New Deal, which is really petty to let a lot of people suffer and die because of a slogan, but then let's change it. You know what? If that's the problem, let's change it. Let's call it whatever they'll agree to. and get it voted in so that we can agree that this needs to happen. And then that opens the door for the legislation to get passed. There's a wonderful piece of legislation, or it's not an actual piece of legislation yet, but it's called the Red, Black, and Green New Deal, and it is a multi-year, multi-issue initiative designed to educate and catalyze Black people to take actions that mitigate the impact of the global climate crisis on Black lives. So we need to stop just looking at climate destruction and realize that it is the lowest income communities that are always hit the hardest and hit first. And so instead of just saying, oh, well, we're going to make everything pretty and green, we need to make sure that these communities that have been neglected and left behind, where they are surrounded by compressor stations, we're actually fighting SoCal Gas right here in our local community of Ventura County, because they want to expand and make this compressor station that is already poisoning children. They want to make it bigger. There are 3 schools within 2-mile radius of this that will be poisoned, that will be toxicified, and they're trying to rush this through without doing the proper environmental studies that would tell them the impacts, because they know that if they did that, they wouldn't be allowed to operate there. And so those are the things that we really need to look at on a local level, is where have these companies, these utility companies, been allowed to set up shop? I driving home today from helping my wife set up her office. There are live oil rigs within feet of farms. Those food feeds us here, and Ventura County is one of the largest agricultural exporters of not only this state, but the country. And it's allowed. That is 100% legal for them to have an oil rig within feet of where they're growing food that feeds us.
Seems pretty sketchy to me.
Exactly. And so we need to look at where these companies have been allowed to drill, where they're allowed to set up shop. And then I also saw something recently that there are thousands of evacuated mines all over this country, where the companies were like, either they went bankrupt, they couldn't make money off of it, they couldn't get the resources out that they needed, especially when the local population stood up and said, you need to get the heck out of here. They just left all their tools, they left all the things there and just dipped. And so there's a lot of things, there are wells and things that we don't even know that are just leaking because they're no longer anybody's responsibility. And so we need a complete environmental assessment, first and foremost, coast to coast, north to south, east to west, top to bottom, everything, every environment needs to be inspected. We have neighborhoods that are being polluted. We have natural parks that are being destroyed. So first and foremost, we need an environmental assessment. And I think that what the Green New Deal aims to do when it does become legislation that we are starting to vote on is that we need a civilian climate corps. We need a civilian conservation corps. Again, we have millions of people that are still unemployed, and we have environmental resources that are being destroyed. Put them to work rebuilding our resources, plant trees, clean up these mines, do the brush and the wildfire things that we do need to do, the mitigation that we do need to do here on the West Coast, so that the Northwest isn't breathing in our fumes all summer and the smoke, because the fires aren't even always happening in your state. A lot of times they're from Oregon, Washington, and California, that is just blowing and polluting the entire country. Like, how crazy is that?
It's very crazy and very real.
And our politicians still won't act. The person that I am challenging, the incumbent, is a Democrat, D+20 district. She votes Democratic every time. Her entire career has voted Democratic, will not stray from party lines. She will not sign on to the Green New Deal. And that's actually a Democratic policy. But she takes money from certain organizations that would affect her decisions. And so we can't get her to support Medicare for all or the Green New Deal. And so if this county, if our country wants to see any kind of change, we need to, we're electing at the congressional level, at your state level, all the way down to your water board and your public works administration, because those people are deciding where these utility companies shut up shop, how they're checked, how they're audited, and how often they're forced to upkeep their properties. Because a lot of the fires that happened here, 2018, 2017, the Thomas fire, the Woolsey fire, we had back-to-back 3 years in a row, the largest wildfires California had ever seen, the largest acreage, the largest destruction, both human and human, probably some of the old San Francisco ones take the cake, but definitely acreage and property and economic destruction as well, because of the farms and everything that was destroyed, the loss of life. that some of those fires were found to be started by faulty SoCal Edison equipment, that they have been negligent at upkeeping. They started the fires and they're still allowed to operate in California, and no restitution, no damages, no any type of recompense has been made of them to fix the problems.
Yeah. And, as we're kind of like transitioning away from this topic, I also want to say that, on our previous episode, we talked about the devastation that was laid by PG&E. So if you want to hear us talk about that, definitely go check that out, because that was also what's happening in the northern part of California. Because yes, companies are not held liable enough for their role in the climate crisis. But with that being said, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to have more with our candidate here. So stay tuned.